And now, National Hockey League Commissioner Gary Bettman at the National Press Club. His remarks and a question and answer session last about an hour.
Good afternoon and welcome to the National Press Club. I'm Rick Dunham, White House correspondent for Business Week magazine and 2005 president of the National Press Club. I'd like to welcome club members and their guests in the audience today, as well as our international media contingent and those of you watching on C-SPAN or listening on the National Press Club radio network. The video archive of today's luncheon is provided by Connect Live and is available to members only through the National Press Club website at www.press.org. Press Club members can also access free transcripts of our luncheons on the website if you want to check the quotes against your notes. Non-members may purchase transcripts, audio tapes, or videotapes by calling 888-343-1940. And if today's luncheon convinces you that you want to become a National Press Club member, you can get more membership information by calling 202-662-7511. Enough for the ads. Before introducing our head table, I'd like to remind our members of some future speakers. Next Monday, November 7th, General Michael Hagee, the Commandant of the U.S. Marine Corps, will be discussing 21st Century Marine Corps, Creating Stability in an Unstable World. On November 18th, Molly Smith, the Artistic Director of the Arena Stage, will be our guest to talk about shows and the upcoming musical Damn Yankees, speaking of another sport. And on December 15th, our speaker will be Petra Nemkova, supermodel and tsunami survivor. If you have any questions for our speaker, please write them on the cards on your tables and pass them up to me. I'll ask as many as time permits. I'd now like to introduce our head table guests and ask them to stand briefly when their names are called. Please hold your applause until all head table guests are introduced. From your right, Henry Breyer, George Washington University, member of the National Press Club. Beth Gorham of Canadian Press. Hugh Pinero, the founder of XM Satellite Radio. Jerry Zremski of the Buffalo News and treasurer of the National Press Club. Bill Daly, deputy commissioner of the NHL. John Hughes of Bloomberg News and the vice chair of the National Press Club Speakers Committee. Skipping over our speaker, we have Bob Carden of Carden Communications and the Speakers Committee member who organized today's event. Thanks very much. Ted Leonsis, who all of you know is the owner of the Washington Capitals and executive at AOL. Jonathan Salant of Bloomberg News and vice president of the National Press Club. Mark Hamrick, Associated Press Broadcast and member of the National Press Club Board of Governors. Barry McKenna of the Globe and Mail. And Steve Ginsburg, the North American sports editor of Reuters and chairman of the National Press Club Fitness Committee, which I need to join. Today's luncheon is very special to me, and please forgive me if I start with a brief personal tangent. I've been a devoted ice hockey fan since my grandfather, Bill Tamarkin, took me to my first Philadelphia Ramblers game at the old Philadelphia Arena in West Philly at the age of 6 during the 1963-64 Eastern Hockey League season. 4 years later, I listened on my transistor radio as Gene Hart called the play-by-play for the first season of the Philadelphia Flyers franchise. I was hooked and cheered on Andre Lacroix and Jean-Guy Gendron, Luan Gotti and Ed Van Impe, Bernie Parent and Doug Favell, even when the roof blew off the new Spectrum and the team had to play home games in Quebec City. And even when Red Berenson and the hated St. Louis Blues knocked our Western Division champions out of the playoffs, and I never figured out why Philadelphia was in the West. As a teenager, I would take the C-bus from Broad and Snyder to the new arena in the remote swamps of South Philadelphia. As a high school senior, I joined millions of Philadelphians who felt chills when Kate Smith, our Flyers' good luck charm, sang "God Bless America" in person as the Flyers wrested the Stanley Cup from the heavily favored Boston Bruins. As the sign said, "Only God saves more than Bernie Parent." When the Flyers won the Cup in '74, I made a decision I now regret. I went to class at Central High rather than going to the big victory parade down Broad Street. 80% of the student body cut school that day, and it was a big, big mistake being young and responsible. When I moved to Texas to be a city desk reporter for the Dallas Times-Herald, I volunteered to work overtime to cover the occasional Dallas Blackhawks Central Hockey League game at Fair Park Coliseum when it wasn't being used as a rodeo arena. That was years before the North Stars moved south. And I couldn't miss the 1979 exhibition game pitting John Muckler's Blackhawks against the U.S. Olympic team months before its miracle on ice at Lake Placid. After heading to Washington in 1984, my wife Pam and I quickly bought a ticket plan for the Caps. We were there when Dale Hunter scored the dramatic overtime goal to beat the Flyers in Game 7 of the most exciting playoff series in Caps history, even though I really was conflicted. And we were there when the Detroit Red Wings swept the Caps to win the Stanley Cup. Although even the Boo Birds can say we all got goosebumps and joined in the standing ovation when the Wings shared their joy with Vladimir Konstantinov, who had suffered the terrible head injury in the car crash the previous year. We were season ticket holders for about 20 years until hockey's lost season of 2004-2005, and that's why we're all here today. Standoff between the owners and the players caused the cancellation of the 2004-05 season, the first time an American professional sports league lost an entire season to a labor dispute. Well, now the NHL is back, due in no small part to the efforts of our guest today, Commissioner Gary Bettman. Before the lockout, hockey faced a grim economic future, something my colleagues at Business Week wrote about in some detail. The NHL was bleeding dollars, Canadian and American. The league didn't command the lucrative TV fees and licensing rights to the staple of the NBA, NFL, and Major League Baseball, and more than any other sport, it depended on the box office for its support. And most owners found that the gate receipts couldn't pay for the rapidly rising player salaries. We can debate who is most to blame for the untenable economic situation. Both sides knew there had to be a new economic model, and after a year without hockey, we now have a new NHL that guarantees cost certainty, which I remember is Commissioner Bettman's mantra, and a labor agreement that creates an economic partnership between management and players. We also have a bunch of new rules that have created a wide-open game with a whole lot more offense. These are the most important of many changes Mr. Bettman has overseen during his 15 years as commissioner. When he took office, NHL teams competed in 11 U.S. markets. That figure has more than doubled. League membership has increased to 30 teams, and its footprint currently includes franchises in non-traditional hockey markets like Nashville and, yes, even Dallas. Regular season attendance, about 14 million in 1993, exceeded 20 million in the 4 years through 2003-2004, and the first month of the new season set an all-time attendance record for October. A native of Queens, New York, Mr. Bettman graduated from Cornell University and NYU School of Law. Prior to being named NHL commissioner, he worked for the New York law firm of Proskauer, Rose, Getz, and Mendelsohn, and served 12 years with the National Basketball Association, attaining the position of senior vice president and general counsel. Like me, the commissioner became a hockey fan at an early age. As a student at Cornell, the alma mater of Hall of Fame goalie Ken Dryden, he and his girlfriend, soon-to-be wife, waited overnight in line for season tickets to Cornell hockey games, including the Big Red's annual victory over my alma mater, the University of Pennsylvania. They also used to drive from Cornell to Asbury Park, New Jersey to take in a little-known singer named Bruce Springsteen at the Stone Pony, a bar on E Street. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the boss, Gary Bettman.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that kind introduction. I will tell you why Philadelphia was in the West, but not now. And I would like to discuss Business Week's article on us in the middle of the work stoppage, but we don't have to do any of that now. These are remarkable times for the National Hockey League. Tonight we will play game number 200 of the 2005-2006 season right here in Washington, and two of the most exciting young players in the league, Ilya Kovalchuk of Atlanta and rookie Alexander Ovechkin of Washington, will put their remarkable skills on display at the MCI Center. They will compete in a game that has been refreshed and reinvigorated by a new economic system, better competitive balance, and some new rules that include a new standard of rules enforcement to allow the skills of our players to dominate. Players will compete in a game that is more offensive-minded, more free-flowing, and more entertaining than at any time in recent memory. Through 197 games, goal scoring is up 30%. Late game dramatics and lead changes have become almost routine, and highlight film plays have been frequent, almost constant. And why this result? The game is being played now as the result of a joint effort, part of an overall initiative in which the NHL game has in effect reinvented itself. The clubs played a role, the players played a role, and our fans played a role. To an unprecedented degree, all constituent groups are stakeholders in the new NHL and the dramas that play out nightly now in arenas across North America. The NHL was formed in 1917, and this cherished trophy, probably the best-known trophy in the world, the Stanley Cup, has been the emblem for hockey supremacy for even 24 years before the NHL's founding. And notwithstanding that long history, October 2005 was our most successful, best attended October in that entire period. That's why this is such a remarkable story for our league, because mere months ago, this league faced what some, not we, but some, characterized as the worst crisis in our history. This Cup and the NHL have survived world wars, the Great Depression, and the economic and cultural changes that have impacted all walks of life. Through it all, our game grew, becoming a truly international sport before it was trendy to call yourself a truly international sport. Last year, however, as everyone here knows, we lost an entire season to a labor dispute. This Cup sat idle. The best part of my job happens to be the honor of presenting the trophy to the captain of our champion. While it was certainly disappointing that there was no crowning moment last year, it was most disappointing because our fans were deprived of the game that they cherish. While our most avid fans felt a terrible void, they nevertheless stuck by us because they knew we could not go on as things were, and they knew that we were committed to fixing our problems. Outside observers wondered, speculated how a league could shut down for a year. The media in Canada and the United States was critical of both players and owners. As stewards of the game, they were critical of how they alleged we were behaving as stewards of the sport. It was a difficult year for all of us, a year that at times felt that it would go on forever. And the momentum that the league is enjoying today seemed so far away. So while I tend not to dwell in the past, I do want to spend a moment talking about what we have endured and how we have emerged as partners with our players and our fans. Not surprisingly, that difficult period of our history provides some great lessons. Much like some of the political crises that occur here in Washington from time to time, or the business crises that we hear so much about, our situation was a long time in the making. For years, we had managed to grow hockey's revenues at a rapid pace to more than $2 billion annually, with over 20 million fans a year in attendance. Make no mistake about it, hockey is a big sport and a big business, and for anyone to suggest to the contrary is simply foolish. Nevertheless, our player costs were consuming larger and larger chunks of our revenues, to the degree that in 2004, player costs consumed about 75% of every dollar that we took in. And while the NFL and the NBA owners and players achieved some mutual success by putting modern economic systems in place for their sports, hockey was working with an outdated economic model. The result of that outdated economic model was ever-increasing ticket prices, significant franchise instability, and a widening of the gap between the have teams and the have-not teams. With this background, at least one lesson is clear, relating to the basic requirements of managing difficult situations effectively, whether they arise in sports, business, or politics. Most important, you must begin with a vision, an unshakable conviction about what must be achieved and how it must be achieved. Everything else will flow from this conviction. Without a rock-solid, hard and fast belief from the start, all of the crisis management techniques in the world are likely to fail. We knew that we had no choice but to create a modern economic system that would allow hockey to survive in the short term and thrive in the long term. The league could not survive without a total overhaul of its economic system. There were simply too many bankruptcies and too many owners who had had enough of losing money and or not being competitive, too many fans distracted by our problems, and a game whose on-ice product was negatively impacted by all of the above. So we had no choice. Things had to get fixed, and this conviction was shared by all 30 of our teams. This conviction was never shaken. Our resolve never wavered. Everything we did throughout this entire process was founded on our core belief. Without this fundamental conviction, we would have been at the mercy of events that were beyond our control. We would have been buffeted by media criticism, and we would have been influenced by negotiating ploys. In short, we would have lost control of the process. I can tell you today that our core convictions held from day one until the day last summer when we finally put hockey's revolutionary economic system in place. During the entire process, every comment made, every question we answered, the message was consistent, the message was the same. The second important element of our commitment to this process was, in effect, our commitment to our fans and our business partners. We had to level with them from the outset. It's common in this post-Enron era to call this transparency, although it frequently appears that in both politics and business, and I suppose in some sports, that transparency is practiced more in words than by actions. We knew, though, that our fans, the most devoted, knowledgeable, and connected in all of sports, had to be included in this process. That is why, also from day one, we made a commitment to communicate directly and regularly with our fans. I, along with our Deputy Commissioner Bill Daly, spoke with the media on a regular basis. We attended town hall meetings with fans across North America. We revamped our internet communications to better deliver information, taking advantage of the increasingly effective network of blogs, fan sites, and online sports columns, and also creating a subject-specific website, NHLCBANews.com, to keep our fans updated. We wanted to do everything possible to keep our fans included, engaged, and informed throughout this process. And we communicated with our business partners on almost a daily basis. They understood our situation. They were, after all, familiar with business realities as we were. We had been transparent about the possibility of a work stoppage far in advance. We were candid with our partners, as flexible as we could be with respect to our business agreements and arrangements, and most important, we were honest in conveying our convictions and our expectations to build the business to new heights when our economic issues were behind us. We did not lose one business partner because of the work stoppage. They all came back with renewed enthusiasm for the game and for the potential going forward of the NHL brand. As a result, we've never had a closer, more productive relationship with our sponsors and broadcasters. All of us now share in a common goal to build the NHL brand. But during this entire process, we still needed to do more to make clear to our fans, as well as the media, that the future of the NHL and NHL hockey was at risk. Several NHL teams were in economic crisis. Year after year, teams and fans in smaller markets watched as those teams fell from contention, watched their star players end up with larger market teams that could better afford to sign and trade for them. The battle to keep ticket prices affordable was getting more and more difficult to win, and the results in other salary-capped leagues was evident for all sports fans to see. Beyond all of the evidence that our business was stressed, we also wanted to do even more to confirm our credibility. I decided about 2 years ago to retain Arthur Levitt, the former head of the Securities and Exchange Commission, a man of impeccable and unimpeachable credentials. I knew full well of Mr. Levitt's well-earned reputation for independence and integrity and his commitment to accuracy in financial reporting. I understood that Mr. Levitt was going to call it as he saw it. In fact, one of the first things that he and I agreed is that he would release the results of his work to the media regardless of what those results showed. Arthur Levitt and his team were given carte blanche to conduct a year-long financial examination of our industry. Mr. Levitt was granted access to every possible financial figure and record for every one of our clubs and all of their related entities. And we did not just hand Mr. Levitt the numbers. He investigated our business, and when he had questions, he asked and asked and asked until he was satisfied with the answer. The result, which many of you probably recall, was an overwhelming loss for the 02-03 season of more than $270 million. It was clear to us, and I think to everybody, that based on how we were then structured, that those losses would continue into the future unless the economic system was overhauled and revolutionized. Mr. Levitt's quote to the press upon revealing the results of his finding still rings with me. He said, quote, "The NHL is on a treadmill to obscurity." And while the Players Union predictably, immediately, and roundly criticized the Levitt report, the conclusions Mr. Levitt reached quickly became the accepted view of the true economic state of our game for our fans, for the media, and I suspect perhaps over time for some players and their families and their agents. What a difference a couple of years make. Now we have a new economic system in place, and it is the most forward-thinking system of any. We now have an enforceable, definable relationship between revenues and expenses. We have reduced the disparities between team payrolls to a level that should not make a competitive difference. Now a team's ability to compete is based on its hockey, front office, and team building skills, not on the team's ability to pay. We have a true partnership with our players so that the future success of our game is shared fairly between owners and players, and the players have responded to this new system with enthusiasm. We are partners in what we think is a bright and shared future. As we planned for that future, though, a central belief, perhaps the most valuable of all, was reaffirmed. While you should not stray from your core values and convictions, you should not be afraid to question old ways of doing business. We knew that when our labor problems ended, we would have just one chance to reintroduce ourselves to our fans and to potential new fans. We took this as a challenge to revisit the ways we had been doing business and playing the game. The result was a series of historic rule changes that, but for our year of absence, we might not have been in a position to make. But make them we did, because with better competitive balance, we wanted to also give our fans a better game, a faster, more skilled, more fluid, more action-packed game. In short, we wanted to give our fans more entertainment. Based on the first 5 weeks, almost 200 games, The partnership of the owners and players has done precisely that, and our fans have let their cheers shout their response. Our fans have set an all-time attendance record for the month of October, and we are playing to over 91% of capacity. With only 5 weeks to prepare for the production and promotion of a new season, our new U.S. cable partner, OLN, is off to a great start. Ratings on our regional sport networks are up an average of 60%. Hockey Night in Canada on the CBC is up around 50%. And TSN, our Canadian cable partner, is up a whopping 200%. Oh, do I love Canada. So, the NHL is back, and back stronger than many people expected. Despite the prophets of doom and gloom saying that we would destroy ourselves and that our fans would never come back, we opened to sold-out arenas and are now playing to 5% more fans than we did at this point in the 03-04 season. We knew the inherent strength of our game and the loyalty of our fans, but who ever believed it could come back this strong? Actually, we did. We had confidence in our game, and we had confidence in our fans. We also understand that we have a great deal more work to do, to constantly renew the trust and loyalty of our fans, to make sure that our game is never so stressed again, to ensure that our rule changes stick and that the game remains fast and fluid. We have wonderful, patient, supportive, passionate fans, and we want more of them. We will continue to grow. And again, here is where our core convictions, the fundamental values shared by both owners and players alike, also come into play. We believe in our game. We believe in our fans, and we are confident about our future. We are all pulling in the same direction now, and we welcome all of you to join along in what we promise will be an exciting and entertaining ride. Thank you again for coming out today.
Great. Thanks very much. We have a number of questions from some knowledgeable hockey fans and reporters. I wanted to start out with the issue that you touched on, which is that there doesn't seem to be the kind of bitterness existing in the NHL in the post-lockout time as there was with Major League Baseball and National Football League after their last labor disputes. Why is hockey different, and why is there not a backlash among the fans that definitely was felt by baseball after its 1994 problems?
That's actually a great question, and there are a number of reasons for that. We start with the fact that our fans tend to be the most knowledgeable and most connected in all of sports. So our fans understood what the problems were, understood what we were doing to fix the problems, and were very patient with us. The place where we would have lost the fans is if we had put them through this and came back with a Band-Aid. I think everybody understands that the result that we achieved has and will continue to make our game not only healthy, but more vibrant. I think, secondly, if you look back in the history of work stoppages in sports, this notion, and we got a lot of criticism at the time, that you somehow have to save an abbreviated season is probably misguided. I think having lost half a season, our fans were more concerned, as I said before, that we fixed it than we come back for a 40 or 50 game season in the playoffs. They wanted to make sure that the disruption was real and meaningful. And so sometimes when you come back with a shortened season that isn't all it can or should be, the fans don't respond as well. I also think in baseball's case, in '95, to have started a season and then not played the conclusion of the season caused some fan backlash because you had begun a process that fans were invested in both financially and emotionally, and taking away the punchline, if you would, I think was a bitter pill for a lot of fans to swallow. In our case, having taken the year, done the rule changes, come back with the right economic system, taken the time to relaunch our game, coupled with the fact that, as I said initially, our fans were engaged in the process and had at their fingertips the information that they wanted to understand what was going on. I think it was the combination of all those factors, plus the culmination in a deal that is a true partnership. We are partners with the players. The players recognize that. They have been great since we've made the deal in terms of the energy and enthusiasm that they've brought back to the game, and most importantly, their interaction with players. We have greater access to the players, both from fans and for the media, than we've ever had before. And so I think it's a combination of all those factors, plus the inherent strength and compelling nature of our game.
We had a question emailed in from Canada, which is, will the new NHL system, salary cap and revenue sharing, lead to the establishment of any new small market teams? That person may be referring to Quebec, Winnipeg, Hamilton, or somewhere else. And then from Buffalo, we have the question, are you concerned about the viability of small market franchises like Buffalo based on early season attendance?
No, I think all teams go through cycles, and I think in Buffalo's case, as the team continues to play as well as it has since the start of the season, the fans will recognize, despite the speculation in the off-season, that the team, having not made a number of free agent moves, but having stuck with its game plan, that while they were criticized for it, the criticism was unfounded. This team is a lot better than people had thought it would be. Management and ownership are sticking with a plan, and I think the Sabres will be fine. And Buffalo has been a terrific market and has a long history and will continue to be so. All of our franchises can be not only survivors, but fully competitive teams over time in the new NHL under this system. This is a system coupled with the revenue sharing component that we believe can ensure the future of all 30 franchises where they're currently located. Which means, in response to the first question, if we ever were to return to the small market the smaller markets that some of them had in Canada that had franchises in the past, if we were to ever return, it would probably have to be the result of expansion, and that's not something we're looking at right now. It's not on the radar screen. We want to make sure that we're back, we're strong, and that all 30 franchises are healthy right where they are, and we think that that's absolutely achievable. And if you look at the results so far this season, we're well on our way to that result.
Well, you may have answered the next two questions in advance, but someone wants to know, does the NHL need 30 teams, and is the NHL too big? Are Dallas and Atlanta and Anaheim really hockey cities? Although I'll cross Dallas off that list.
See that? You know what? We do well wherever we have franchises. At every point in time, every one of our cities has demonstrated an ability and a willingness to support the franchises in their cities. The fact is, because of the stresses that I referred to with the economic system and the competitive balance, it made it difficult for some markets to maintain a competitive product, and that caused attendance and other business factors to suffer. The fact is, wherever we are, including the non-traditional markets in the Sun Belt, we can and we will do well, particularly under this system and particularly with the new rules and rules interpretation that we're using to make our games as entertaining as possible. Hockey, you know, I'm not a believer that, quote, non-traditional markets are at a disadvantage. I think people, when they go to an NHL game, if they've never been there before, and this is a pretty mobile society with a lot of transplants, but people go to a game and they get hooked because in person there's no better form of sports entertainment or entertainment in general than going to an NHL hockey game, particularly the way it's being played now.
I want to throw in three questions from fans before we get back to reporters. Is the reversal of home and away uniforms in the league a permanent change? There are a whole bunch of people who want to see the different colored uniforms in when their visiting teams come in.
Well, I suppose nothing in life is permanent. For I guess 20 years, the teams wore their colored, dark uniforms on the road, and then we heard a lot of feedback that those were the more attractive uniforms, and the home fans wanted to see them. Also, I think if you go back in history, before washing machines were as good as they are now and before teams carried as many jerseys, you didn't have the white uniform on the road for a road trip because it would get dirty faster. That's no longer an issue, as we're seeing. And at some point in time, the sentiment will be probably to switch it back, and that's something where we can bend and be flexible with the will of our fans.
Because of all the speed and the new hockey rules, teams are needing more defensemen, or the defensemen are getting tired out chasing the forwards all around the ice. Do you see teams needing to add another defenseman to their rosters?
I think the most important element now on defense is skill and speed. The slower, grinded-out, stand-up defenseman who stands at the blue line waiting for the offense to come in gets blown by. And so it's not about number, it's about skill, it's about speed, and that's what we think is the most important elements of what we're doing with the product on the ice. So you don't need more, you just need to make sure you're getting the right attributes from your defenseman.
And on the shootout, we have one fan who declares that the fans have spoken and they love the shootout. When can we expect to see it in the Stanley Cup playoffs?
The fans have spoken, they love it, it's been great, but it's really for the regular season. One of the great strengths of our game is the fact that we play compelling sudden death hockey in the playoffs. You can't do that in the regular season in an 82-game schedule where there are planes to make and back-to-back games in different cities. So the long and short answer is we think particularly overtime playoff hockey is as good as you can get in sports. We heard the fans, though, and they wanted resolution in the regular season, and the response has been overwhelming. You can watch games now where even when the home team loses in the shootout, the fans go home not excited that the team lost, but excited that they saw something really special and entertaining. So the early verdict has been terrific for the shootout in the regular season.
There are a number of rookies who are among the best players in the league in their first month in hockey. Alex Ovechkin here, and some guy in Pittsburgh named Crosby, I think. I was curious what you think the new crop of players is going to bring to the league, and how you plan to use the names and the personalities to help promote and build the league.
Well, now that we're in a partnership, and now that the players are even more accessible than they've been, it's going to be important for us, now that everybody's familiar with what's going on the ice, to make our players better known. I think Washington's prospects are spectacular going forward from a competitive standpoint. Alexander Ovechkin is the real deal, and he's only going to get better and better and better. Crosby and Pittsburgh, again, I think the rivalry between Pittsburgh and Washington that used to exist 10, 12 years ago is going to be back in a big way. Kovalchuk in Atlanta, I mean, the hockey on the East Coast in particular is blessed with some great young stars, and our job is going to be to make sure that sports fans throughout the world know who these players are.
I wanted to ask about some of the new business ventures that you're starting to work on and planning. First off with XM satellite radio, what that might bring to you, but also what else you have in mind. What kinds of new business ventures do you have that could make hockey stand out from the other major league sports?
Well, first of all, in you Pineros here, we are thrilled with the confidence that XM satellite radio has shown in the NHL. You came forward to make this deal with us shortly after we emerged from the work stoppage, in the belief that our fans are so committed to the game and so passionate about the game that they'd be back and be back quickly. And we are grateful for that show of confidence, and we are thrilled with our new partnership with you. The NHL Network has been a staple of cable television in Canada for the last 3 years plus. We anticipate launching an NHL network in the United States. We will be using the digital world going forward, wireless, streaming, VOD, all of the applications that you're reading about on a daily basis that are emerging. And so because our fans tend to be more affluent, more educated, more tech savvy than the fans in any other sport, we think that with the rich content that we have, technology is going to play a vital role in bringing us new fans and satisfying our current fans by bringing them even closer to the game.
Well, to go along with technology and to transition into questions about televising of hockey, One of the reporters says hockey is widely regarded as televising poorly. Are there existing or near future technologies the league is exploring to improve the televised product?
There are actually about three things that immediately come to mind. The first is HDTV, high def. As important as people focus on the clarity of high def television and the digital sound, the most important aspect in terms of hockey is the wide aspect ratio. You will be able to see more of the zone. You can basically see all of the players, and you can see plays develop. If you're a hockey fan and follow the game intently, you might not need that as a new casual fan because you can anticipate where people are standing and how a play is developing. But for newer fans, being able to see it, I think, is going to be a big help. Secondly, our broadcasts will over time get more interactive in terms of pulling up statistics, in terms of getting more information about the game, and we think that will be a plus. And we're working on some new technology with respect to a real-time scoring system, which will give you more information to follow the development of plays and give you statistics and information about actually what's going on the ice besides the mere picture as it's taking place. So, for example, you'll be able to know how fast the puck was going on the pass that led to the shot that led to the goal, and you'll know exactly how fast that was. You'll be able to track where the goaltender's letting in goals and where he's been stopping shots. And we think all of this information that's now available and will be available digitally will give our fans and new sports fans more information about the game. And because the game, we believe, is so entertaining and compelling, that information will cause fans to be even more interested and more satisfied by the experience.
Several reporters wanted to know what you think of OLN's coverage of the NHL, what you can be doing to encourage Comcast or other cable networks to make OLN more readily available to people. And then I'll give my 2 cents worth, since I think Bill Clement and Keith Jones are terrific, and even that guy who's a New York Ranger apologist, Neil Smith, seems to be doing pretty well too. But go ahead.
I didn't know you were such a homer. Nobody could tell that, right? OLN has done, Comcast has done a spectacular job. To think that we made a deal with them in August, and we were really, other than the Tour de France, the first real, well, actually, including the Tour de France, we were the first real-time team sport that had to be carried live. And the fact that they got up and running for their first broadcast with terrific talent both in front of the camera and behind the camera, and they did it by October 5th, is nothing short of a miracle and a testament to how good they are. We are very important to OLN, and OLN is going to continue to cover the game in ways that will give us better storytelling, a broader look at the game, without distraction from other sports. And so we think that over time, as they continue to invest more and more in our game and get better and better at televising it and bringing it to our fans, the coverage is only going to get better. They are working very hard in terms of increasing their carriage. We have every expectation that they'll go from 64 million homes to 70 million homes to 80 million homes. They recently, last week, made a deal with Cablevision to deal with the carriage issues in the New York metropolitan area, and we are appreciative of the confidence that OLN has shown in us, and we are confident that long-term, and don't judge this on just 5 weeks of a season in a relationship that's barely 2 months old, but over time, people, particularly sports fans watching television, are going to be impressed with how good a job they do in bringing the NHL to our fans and to sports viewers on television.
Sports merchandise is important to fans given their passion for the games, and it's a revenue driver for teams and the league. Someone in the audience wants to know if there are any plans for throwback or classic jerseys for teams to play in, given the success of the NBA and NFL in those, and any other ideas that you have for generating additional revenue from merchandise.
Well, two things. One, we do have and have had classic jerseys, and so if you bring your card up here, we'll send you an order form for some. And secondly, we are working with the hockey company, which is now owned by Reebok, and I think over the next 12 months or for next season, you will see dramatic changes in the styling and the look and feel and performance nature of what NHL uniforms will look like. Our players are basically skating in the same uniforms that they've had for the last 40 or 50 years, and you're going to see some changes in that that will accentuate performance and their ability to perform, keep them cooler, and make them look sleeker. And so those are developments that you will see probably for the start of next season.
Does the new agreement address the problem of the lower Canadian dollar leading to teams like Calgary or Edmonton either being less competitive or moving? And can you talk about some of the key provisions in the new collective bargaining agreement that you may not have mentioned in your introductory remarks?
The Canadian teams are doing, if early indications are any indication of what the future is going to look like, are doing spectacularly well. The way this system now works, all teams can be within a range that should keep them competitive, a range financially that should keep them competitive in terms of talent on the ice. To the extent the dollar moves one way or the other, as between the U.S. and Canada, the revenue sharing program, which is an essential element of our agreement, that will compensate to the extent necessary to the Canadian teams if their revenues are suffering relative to everybody else's because of the dollar. Under this agreement, we have more liberalized free agency. What we really have is the partnership. Players as a group get 54% of our revenues, which is a salary cap, and an agreement by the league to pay the 54%, so that's the partnership. Each team has a hard salary cap. There's an individual player salary cap. No player can make more than a certain percentage of what the cap is when he signs his contract. And then there's a rookie cap system. So what we have is liberalized free agency and a very tight, predictable system for clubs to manage their finances and have plans to build teams and acquire talent and keep talent as that talent develops. And so a team with a plan can start with young players and fill in the pieces and watch them grow and watch the team get better. The Washington Capitals, I think, are an excellent example of a team that's decided to go with its core group and let the players develop and build over time instead of looking for a short-term fix. That, to me, is the right way to run a team under a salary cap system.
Now that hockey's been playing for a month, what do you think of some of the rule changes? And particularly, there have been a lot of penalty calls because some of the defensemen are clutching and grabbing and hooking and trying to slow down the forwards. Do you think that eventually there will be fewer penalties so we can see more 5-on-5 hockey and the special teams won't be as important in determining the outcome of games?
You have to start from the premise, which is an accurate premise, that nobody wants to see clutching and grabbing and hooking and holding. And so we don't want players using their sticks to play defense. We don't want to see the free hand used to grab a player who's going to beat you when you're the defensive player. The only way you can stop that is to call the penalties. If you don't call the penalties, then the players, because they're so good at what they do, will push the limits and they will do it. This isn't the honor system. You're going to have to call penalties to make the behavior stop. The only way the penalties are going to come down isn't going to be because we're going to lessen the standard. We are committed to seeing this through and upholding the standard, to open up the flow of the game, to let the skilled players have their skill and not have them be neutralized by less skilled players. You want to play defense in this game, you better skate and you better have body position. You cannot clutch and grab. So the answer to the question is penalties will be called as long as the players are committing the penalties. Having said that, our players and our coaches are so good that they will adjust. They have been adjusting the number of penalties. On any given night, any particular game, you can see a ton of penalties. But overall, if you watch from the preseason to the beginning of the regular season to now, fewer penalties are being called. Again, not because we're lessening the standard, but because the players and the coaches are adjusting, and because they're so good at what they do, they will continue to adjust.
One rule change that wasn't made had to do with fighting or eliminating fighting from the game. You won't be surprised, before a group of reporters, there are at least 3 questions on the subject. Do you have any further plans to eliminate fighting, to have game misconducts or automatic suspensions for people who fight? One reporter wants to know, when will hockey teams stop hiring goons to get into fights? And then, do you think that the new rules have had any impact and reduced the amount of fighting on the ice?
No, yes, yes, no. I need all three of these to do it. There is less fighting in the game. We did make a change. If you instigate a fight in the last 5 minutes of a game, you get ejected from the game and you get suspended for the next game, and that is a pyramiding, if you will, penalty, because to the extent that there is a flashpoint in the game that brings about a fight in the spur of the moment, that's been a part of the game. That's part of a game where players are skating at each other at up to 30 miles an hour, where body contact is encouraged and players are carrying sticks. So there is a certain, if you look at the game as a whole, you understand how fighting evolved. Because I think there's less frustration right now and there's more open skating, the number of fights, I believe, is down about 40%, maybe a little bit more from where it was in the 03-04 season. So without making a rule change on a global basis with respect to fighting, you're seeing less fighting because the game's more wide open. And we've always taken the position that fighting will evolve with the game itself, and I think that's exactly what you're seeing. With respect to goons or not, I think under the rules as the game is being played, there is a premium on skill, and teams that are focused on winning are focusing on skilled players who can skate. If you happen to be able to fight as well, that's a bonus, but I don't think the teams, I don't mean it's a bonus in the global sense, I meant in terms of how you allocate your talent. But as it relates to players who are playing, if you don't have the requisite skills to skate and play in this game under these rules, I think you're going to have a harder and harder time hooking up with the team.
Well, Donald Brashear will be happy to hear that answer. A question that affects us in Washington.
Are you going to tell Donald that?
How do you sell hockey in a city where it's the second or third or fourth sport? And have you noticed in other cities, I see the real estate on the front page of sports sections is really important to hockey. And not to single out the Washington Post, but it's been clear since the beginning of the year that they have not been giving the Caps the same kind of coverage as they did before. What can you do about that to try to return it, since the fans have largely returned to the sports front pages of sports sections?
Well, I've always been a proponent of a free and open press, and I think the Washington Capitals should be given the benefit of that. More importantly, it's an interesting question because in lots of cities, off the top of my head, Philadelphia, Detroit, forget the Canadian cities because we're number one in all of those, Colorado, we're not the number 4 sport. We're in those cities, we're probably the number 1 sport, and nobody then asks, well, what's baseball or basketball or football going to do to get more coverage? The fact of the matter is the fans are speaking resoundingly. They like the game. They're coming out in record numbers. And we think that the entertaining product that we're putting on the ice warrants increasing attention. And most media outlets are giving us at least the level of attention that we got before the work stoppage. Many are giving us more. And for those that aren't, we beg, we implore, we ask nicely, and then we pound the table and demand more. But the fact is, I think that as it becomes clearer and clearer that not only haven't we been damaged, but we're back stronger than anybody could have predicted, the coverage that we get from the media, we hope, will and should increase.
Since you're in Washington, I have to ask 2 political questions, unrelated. First is your stance on steroid testing policy bills currently before the House and Senate. And the other comes from New York. How do you feel about an NHL team owner, perhaps Tom Golisano, possibly running for governor or running for public office at all?
I'm not sure I should be endorsing somebody who hasn't declared. So Tom is a terrific owner. He saved the Buffalo Sabres franchise for Western New York, and I have no doubt that anything Tom decides to do, he will be great at, and anybody associated with him will be delighted with what he does. Whether or not he has political aspirations at this point, I don't know. I know he's having a lot of fun with the Sabres, and I'm not sure how successful anybody would be tearing him away from that pursuit. With respect to steroids, as part of the new collective bargaining agreement, and maybe I was remiss in not raising this before, we, with our Players Association, have a policy for testing for performance-enhancing drugs, testing on a random basis each year with severe penalties. Basically, first time you're caught, you miss a quarter of the season without pay. Second time, 3/4 of the season. And third time, you're out of the league, subject to possible reinstatement at least a couple of years down the road. We don't think performance-enhancing drugs is much of an issue. If you look at the history of hockey players throughout the world being tested for the World Championships, for the World Cup, for the Olympics, you rarely ever get a positive test, and if you do, it's probably because it's been prescribed for therapeutic use. So we don't think, unlike possibly some of the other sports, that this is an issue, and we think we can deal with it in order to make sure our fans and the world at large is giving a comfort level that we are performance-enhancing drug-free. So we're not adverse to random testing. We're not adverse to punishing. We think this notion of a one-size-fits-all program for all sports is a little overreactive from our standpoint. I think the systems that Congress may seek to impose, if they choose to do that, should be reflective of each sport. If it's a sport that hasn't had a history, I'm not sure you need to be testing 5 times a year. If you're a sport like ours, where a third of your players come from outside of North America, requiring testing in a 2-month off season is a pretty tough burden, again, for a sport that doesn't really seem to have a problem. So the long and short answer is we're happy to ensure the public that our sport is clean. Testing isn't a problem, but we think we can do it better ourselves. If Congress does regulate it, we will cooperate, but we hope it's done in a way that doesn't impose upon us the types of burdens and restrictions that might, make sense in some other sports, but are really overkill when they come to our sport. Finally, and you have to think about it in this context, banning an Olympic amateur athlete for 2 years the first time on a positive test and then life, might, you can conclude, be an appropriate response. You're representing your country, you've brought disgrace and dishonor. A professional athlete who, in any sport, who uses performance-enhancing substances, I would never endorse it. It's wrong. But when you punish, you are depriving them of their livelihood. This is employment-based testing, and I think that needs to be taken into account when you're looking at what the penalties are. The penalties should be severe. They should be harsh, but they shouldn't be such that the punishment doesn't fit the crime.
Well, we're running out of time, so before I ask the final question, I'd like to make some presentations to you.
Thank you.
We'll start with a certificate of appreciation from the Press Club for your appearance.
Thank you.
We have our own cup here. It's not quite as nice as the one you have behind you. Doesn't fit quite as much champagne, but your own Press Club mug.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry that I don't have an official National Press Club hockey jersey to present to you, but instead I have the official Press Club softball team shirt.
Very nice.
You can wear it to your next Springsteen concert. And like the Capitals, our Press Club squad has a losing record, but like the Caps, we play hard, we have some good young talent, and we have solid, supportive ownership.
And the future is bright.
Yes, exactly, especially when the 20-somethings take over from we have 40 and 50-somethings playing, so we're not quite like the Caps, but the 20-somethings may give us a winning team down the road before too long. But the final question, if I can ask one last Homer question, and you might tell that this comes from Washington. Who votes for the NHL Rookie of the Month? And what are the criteria for selection? A few people think that Alex Ovechkin, with 8 goals in October, may have had a better month than Sidney Crosby.
Oh, it's always good to be in Washington. You know what? Alexander Ovechkin had a great month. In consultation with media input, ultimately it's the PR element of the league that deals with making this selection. I do understand it was a very close call, and while Mr. Ovechkin had more goals, I do believe in the same number of games Mr. Crosby had more points. Having said that, I think month to month this is going to be a pick'em, and I wouldn't wager who'll be the Rookie of the Year because I think the rivalry, both team-wise and on a personal level, between Crosby and Ovechkin is going to be great for the fans of those teams and for the league as a whole. So I apologize to Alexander that he didn't win the award this year. I know there were many that think he deserved it. There's actually a goaltender in Los Angeles who went, I think, 6-1 for October, and he's feeling a little deprived. But the fact that people are upset about that, this is good news because it means you're interested. So go buy tickets, go watch him play, and maybe he'll win it next month. Thank you very much.
Great. I'd like to thank Commissioner Bettman very much for being here, and thank you to Ted Leonsis for joining us as well. Game is 7 o'clock tonight against Atlanta, if anyone wants to go. Thanks also to National Press Club staff members Joanne Booz, Melinda Cook, Howard Rothman for helping organize today's lunch. Thanks to the Press Club Library for its research, and we're adjourned.
You want to come again tonight? Okay.
I think I will be there. I think I may have it in my pocket.
Oh, really? Okay, you come with your family?
My wife Pam is right
All
over there.
Come by the box. Okay. You were great. You were okay.
He called first.